few nights ago, I experienced something that shook me to my core. It was one of those nights where sleep eluded me, where my mind wandered through the realms of dreams but never quite found its way to rest. As the hours slipped away and the darkness outside my window deepened, I finally succumbed to exhaustion, drifting off into a fitful slumber. But what awaited me on the other side of consciousness was far from the peaceful respite I craved. I awoke with a start, my body frozen in place, a sensation of weight pressing down on my chest like an unseen force. Panic surged through me as I realized that I was trapped, unable to move or speak, a prisoner in my own body. And then, I saw it, a dark figure looming over me, its form indistinct and shadowy against the dim light filtering through the curtains. It seemed to materialize out of the darkness itself, its presence suffocating, its eyes boring into mine with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. I tried to scream, to lash out against the paralysis that held me captive, but no sound escaped my lips, no movement stirred my limbs. I was powerless, at the mercy of this dark entity that hovered over me like a specter from the depths of my nightmares. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly as I lay there, locked in a silent struggle against the unseen force that held me in its grasp. Each passing moment felt like an eternity, the darkness closing in around me until I felt like I would suffocate beneath its weight. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the paralysis lifted, releasing me from its icy grip and allowing me to gasp for air as I bolted upright in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. I sat there for a long time, trembling and shaken, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But deep down, I knew that some mysteries are not meant to be unraveled, some terrors not meant to be understood. And so, I pulled the covers tight around me, seeking solace in the safety of the light until the darkness finally gave way to the dawn.
I shuddered as I sat alone in the darkness of my house, the only sound the soft creaking of the old floorboards beneath me. The power had gone out unexpectedly, leaving me stranded in that eerie silence. I fumbled for my phone, but it was dead. Of course it was. Suddenly I froze. Was that a noise? A faint scratching at the window like nails on glass. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained my ears, listening intently. Another sound, this time from the back door, a low, menacing thud. Panic gripped me as I realized I wasn't alone. Someone or something was outside, trying to get in. I fumbled in the darkness for something, anything to defend myself with, but my hands came up empty. I felt like a mouse trapped in a cage with a hungry cat outside. The darkness felt suffocating, pressing in on me from all sides. I tried to control my breathing, to calm my racing heart, but fear had a grip on me that refused to loosen. And then, as suddenly as it had vanished, the darkness was shattered by a blinding light. The power was back. I blinked, my eyes struggling to adjust to the sudden brightness. With trembling hands I rushed to the nearest window and threw back the curtains, ready to confront whatever had been lurking outside. But there was nothing there, just the empty darkness of the night. Relief flooded through me as I realized that whatever it was gone now. I took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the tension drain from my body. As I sat there, bathed in the warm glow of the lights, I couldn't help but wonder, what was it that had tried to get inside? And would it come back? But for now, all was calm again, and I was safe. It was a night like any other. The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows on the deserted street. I found myself walking alone, the only sound being the echo of my footsteps against the pavement. As I ventured further down the street, a sense of unease began to creep over me. It was as if the darkness itself was alive, watching my every move. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild. But then I heard it, a faint whisper carried on the wind. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I strained to listen, but the whisper was barely audible, like the murmurs of ghosts. Ignoring the voice of reason telling me to turn back, I pressed on, drawn by an inexplicable curiosity. The street seemed to stretch on endlessly, the shadows growing thicker with each step. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a figure lurking in the darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I watched it slink closer, its form obscured by the shadows. Panic seized me, and I broke into a run, desperate to escape whatever horror lurked in the darkness. But no matter how fast I ran, the figure seemed to stay just out of reach, always lurking in the shadows, just beyond my line of sight. I thought I could hear it laughing, a cold, cruel sound that sent shivers down my spine. It was then that I realized I was not alone on that quiet, dark street. There was something else out there, something sinister and malevolent, waiting to consume me in its darkness. I don't know how long I ran, or how far I went, but eventually, I found myself back where I started, standing on that desolate street, bathed in moonlight. And as I looked around, I realized with a sinking feeling that the darkness had not disappeared. It had only grown stronger, more suffocating. That night, I learned a terrifying truth that sometimes, the scariest things are not the monsters that lurk in the shadows, but the darkness that resides within ourselves. And as I stood there, surrounded by darkness, I knew that I would never truly escape the horrors of that quiet, dark street.
I was home alone, nestled in my bed, seeking solace in the soft embrace of sleep. The house was quiet, enveloped in darkness, save for the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains. As I lay there, drifting on the edge of consciousness, a sound pierced the silence, faint at first, like a whisper in the night. I dismissed it as my imagination running wild, the creaks and groans of an old house settling into its slumber. But then it came again, louder this time, more insistent. My heart quickened its pace, a knot forming in the pit of my stomach as I strained to listen, to decipher the source of the mysterious noise. With trembling hands, I reached for the bedside lamp, casting a dim light across the room as I forced myself to sit up, to confront whatever lurked in the shadows below. Each step down the staircase felt like an eternity, the floorboards groaning beneath my weight as I descended into the unknown. The air grew heavy with anticipation, every nerve on edge as I inched closer to the source of the disturbance. And then, there it was, a faint scratching, like claws against wood, echoing through the empty halls of the house. My breath caught in my throat, my pulse pounding in my ears as I summoned the courage to investigate further. With a trembling hand, I reached for the doorknob, my fingers closing around it with a vice-like grip as I slowly pushed the door open, revealing the darkness that lay beyond. But as the door swung open, the scratching ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that hung in the air like a shroud. I stood there for a moment, frozen in place, before finally mustering the courage to step forward, to confront whatever awaited me in the darkness below.
I remember it vividly, like it was yesterday. It was a cold, moonless night, the kind that sends shivers down your spine before anything even happens. I was nestled in my bed, wrapped in layers of blankets, trying to lull myself into sleep. But sleep seemed elusive that night. As I lay there, the house was enveloped in an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional creaks and groans of an old building settling. But then, from somewhere outside my window, I heard it. A faint scratching sound, like long fingernails dragging across glass. At first I tried to dismiss it as the wind playing tricks on my mind. But as the minutes stretched into hours, the sound grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to echo through the stillness of the night, sending a chill down my spine. I mustered up the courage to peer out the window, expecting to see nothing but darkness. But what I saw made my blood run cold, a shadowy figure, hunched over and scraping its claws against the glass, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly intensity. I recoiled in horror, scrambling to shut the window and draw the curtains tight. But even as I did, the scratching persisted, growing more frenzied with each passing moment. It was as if whatever lurked outside was determined to break through, to invade the sanctuary of my room. I huddled in bed, paralyzed with fear, as the scratching continued well into the early hours of the morning. When dawn finally broke, the sound ceased, leaving behind only a lingering sense of dread. To this day, I can't shake the memory of that night, the night I heard those strange sounds in the darkness, and felt the presence of something sinister lurking just beyond the safety of my walls.
I used to believe in the sanctity of privacy. The notion that my life was mine to live, free from prying eyes and unwelcome intrusion. But then, he came into my life, the shadow, the phantom, the stalker. It began subtly, with little hints that someone was watching. A flicker of movement in the corner of my eye, a feeling of being followed down empty streets at night. I brushed it off at first, chalking it up to paranoia. But the signs kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. Soon, it wasn't just physical manifestations of his presence. He started leaving messages, cryptic notes slipped under my door, emails from unknown addresses detailing intimate details of my life that only a select few should know. It was as though he had access to every corner of my existence, every hidden thought and secret desire laid bare before him. I tried to fight back, to regain control over my own life. I changed my locks, deleted my social media accounts, even moved to a new city. But no matter what I did, he was always there, lurking in the shadows, his presence a constant weight on my mind. Now, as I sit here writing this, I can feel him closing in on me once again. The hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, and a chill runs down my spine as I realize that he is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. He is in the whisper of the wind outside my window, in the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. He is a ghost, a specter haunting my every waking moment, and I fear that I will never be free of him. I glance around the coffee shop, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. But no matter where I look, I can't shake the sense that he's here, hiding in plain sight amongst the bustling crowd. I quickly finish my drink and make a beeline for the exit, hoping to escape his gaze once and for all. As I step out onto the sidewalk, I feel a presence behind me, and my heart begins to race. I pick up my pace, weaving through the throngs of people on the busy street, but no matter how fast I go, he's always just a few steps behind. Finally, I duck into a narrow alleyway, hoping to lose him in the maze of winding paths and dark corners. But as I glance over my shoulder, I see him emerge from the shadows, his eyes boring into mine with an intensity that sends shivers down my spine. I turn and run, my footsteps echoing off the walls as I flee into the night. But no matter how far I go, I know that he'll always be there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for his next chance to strike. Yesterday started like any other day, with the sun rising lazily over the city skyline. But as I went about my morning routine, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. I tried to push the thoughts of him out of my mind as I went about my day, but he was always there, lurking just beyond the edge of my consciousness. Every shadow seemed to hide his form, every whisper carried the echo of his voice. As the day wore on, my anxiety only grew stronger, until it felt like I was suffocating under the weight of his relentless pursuit. I tried to lose myself in work, burying myself in endless tasks and projects, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the feeling that he was closing in on me. Finally, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a deep shade of orange, I made my way home, hoping to find some respite from the constant fear that gnawed at the edges of my mind. But as I stepped through the door of my apartment, I knew that I had been naive to think that I could ever truly escape him. For there, sitting on my kitchen table, was a single red rose, a chilling reminder that he was always one step ahead, always watching, always waiting.
I remember it like a recurring nightmare, haunting me even in the light of day. It was one of those bone-chilling nights when the city seemed to hold its breath, wrapped in an eerie stillness. I had just finished my shift at the hospital, weary and longing for the comfort of my own bed. As I boarded the last bus home, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease creeping over me. The bus was nearly empty, except for a few solitary figures scattered throughout. I chose a seat near the back, hoping to blend into the shadows and disappear from the world until I reached my destination. But fate had other plans that night. As the bus rattled through the deserted streets, I felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, as if someone's gaze was boring into me. Glancing around, I saw him, a man shrouded in darkness, lurking in the shadows near the front of the bus. His eyes gleamed with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild after a long night of work. But every time I stole a glance in his direction, I found his eyes fixed on me, unblinking and full of menace. My heart began to race as the bus continued its journey, each passing minute feeling like an eternity. I considered getting off at the next stop and calling a cab, but something held me back, an irrational fear that he would follow me, that his presence would somehow grow more menacing in the darkness outside. As we neared my stop, I mustered up the courage to confront him, to demand that he stop staring and leave me alone. But when I turned to face him, he was gone, vanished into thin air like a ghost in the night. Trembling with a mixture of relief and dread, I stepped off the bus and hurried home, casting furtive glances over my shoulder with every step. And though I made it home safely that night, The memory of being stalked by a stranger on the bus still haunts me, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurk in the darkness when we least expect them. It was a stormy evening, the kind where the wind howls like a mournful beast and the rain lashes against the windows with relentless fury. I was home alone with my faithful dog, Max, the only source of comfort in the face of the brewing tempest. As the hours dragged on, the storm seemed to intensify, rattling the old house and casting long shadows across the walls. I tried to distract myself with mundane tasks, anything to keep my mind from dwelling on the ominous atmosphere outside. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled like a heavy weight on my chest. Then, as the clock struck midnight, it began, a soft tapping at the window, barely audible over the roar of the storm. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the wind, a branch scraping against the glass in its desperate bid for entry. But when the tapping grew more insistent, more deliberate, I felt a chill run down my spine. Max, sensing my unease, let out a low growl, his hackles rising as he stared intently at the window. With trembling hands, I approached cautiously, peering out into the darkness beyond. And that's when I saw it. A figure standing just beyond the reach of the porch light, its form obscured by the shadows. At first I couldn't make out any details, just a vague silhouette swaying in the wind like a specter from some half-remembered nightmare. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw something that made my blood run cold, a pair of glowing eyes, burning with an otherworldly intensity. I tried to tear my gaze away, to retreat to the safety of the house and lock the doors against whatever lurked outside. But then, I heard it, a voice, soft and seductive, whispering my name on the wind. It promised me things I couldn't quite comprehend, things that sent a shiver of dread coursing through my veins.
Last week, I found myself seeking refuge from the relentless clamor of daily life within the welcoming embrace of the woods. Towering sentinels of nature surrounded me, their stoic branches reaching heavenward like ancient guardians, their rustling leaves a soft symphony of whispers that seemed to carry secrets untold. Beneath my feet, the earth yielded to my steps, carpeted in a lush tapestry of fallen leaves that whispered tales of seasons past. In the cool tranquility of the forest, I sought solace, a respite from the cacophony of the world beyond the trees. As I ventured deeper into the heart of the woods, a subtle unease began to weave its tendrils around my consciousness, casting a shadow over the tranquility I sought. The once lively chorus of bird calls and rustling leaves fell silent, swallowed by an eerie stillness broken only by the soft murmur of the wind. It was as if the very air held its breath, as if the forest itself was watching, waiting, aware of something lurking just beyond the threshold of perception. At first, I brushed aside the creeping tendrils of unease as mere figments of an overactive imagination, the product of solitude and the shifting shadows of the trees. But with each passing moment, the feeling grew stronger, more palpable, until it wrapped around me like a suffocating cloak, a presence both unseen and undeniable. Desperate to flee the oppressive weight of this unseen presence, I quickened my pace, my heart hammering in my chest with each hurried step. Yet, no matter how fast I moved, the feeling persisted, an intangible specter trailing behind me through the labyrinthine paths of the forest, an unseen watcher in the depths of the woods. Then, as I rounded a bend in the winding trail, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a fleeting glimpse of shadow darting through the underbrush. Fear gripped my chest, icy fingers tracing lines of dread along my spine, as I realized that I was not alone in the woods. Something, or someone, was stalking me, watching my every move with eyes I could not see. I attempted to cry out, to summon help from the depths of the forest, but my voice faltered and died in my throat, swallowed by the oppressive silence that surrounded me. Panic surged through my veins, a tidal wave of terror threatening to overwhelm me, as I grappled with the realization that I was trapped, alone and defenseless, in the clutches of some unseen force. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone, fingers shaking as I fumbled to dial for help, praying for deliverance from the encroaching darkness. But as the seconds stretched into eternity, despair gnawed at the edges of my resolve, threatening to consume me whole. Just when I thought all hope was lost, a distant sound pierced the oppressive silence, the faint echo of voices calling out my name, a beacon of salvation cutting through the darkness. With renewed determination, I followed the sound, crashing through the underbrush until I burst into a sunlit clearing, greeted by the worried faces of my friends. Relief flooded through me, washing away the fear and uncertainty that had gripped me in its icy embrace. Yet, even as we made our way back to safety, the memory of that unseen presence lingered like a shadow in the depths of my mind, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked just beyond the edge of perception in the heart of the woods.
With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I realized that whatever stood outside wasn't human, wasn't anything I had ever encountered before. It was a creature of the night, a harbinger of darkness come to claim its prey. But I refused to be lured into its clutches. With Max by my side, I stood my ground, watching as the creature slunk back into the shadows, defeated for now, but never truly gone. And as the first light of dawn broke through the storm clouds, I knew that I had faced true terror and emerged unscathed, a survivor of the night's darkest horrors.
Gathered on a crisp autumn afternoon, my friends and I found ourselves drawn to the old abandoned house on the outskirts of town like moths to a flame. Its presence loomed over us, a relic of bygone days standing sentinel against the backdrop of the changing seasons. We exchanged eager glances, our youthful spirits stirred by the whispered promises of adventure that seemed to emanate from its weathered walls. With hearts pounding and laughter bubbling up from within us, we pushed open the rusted gate and stepped onto the overgrown path that led to the house. The air was thick with the scent of fallen leaves and decay, but we paid it no mind, our minds consumed by the thrill of the unknown that lay ahead. As we approached the house, its once grand facade loomed before us, its windows boarded up and its paint peeling in places. Yet, we were undeterred by its decrepit appearance, fueled by a sense of youthful curiosity and the unbreakable bond of friendship that bound us together. With each creak of the floorboards and every gust of wind that rattled the windows, our excitement grew, our imaginations running wild with thoughts of the secrets that lay hidden within its walls. We explored every room, our footsteps echoing off the empty halls as we dared each other to venture deeper into the darkness, our laughter mingling with the whispers of the past that seemed to linger in the air. But as the sun began to sink below the horizon and shadows lengthened around us, a sense of unease crept over our group like a chill wind. The house seemed to take on a life of its own, its walls whispering secrets and its floors groaning beneath our weight, as if warning us to tread carefully in the realm of the unknown. And then, in the fading light of dusk, we stumbled upon it, a hidden staircase leading down into the bowels of the house, its entrance concealed behind a heavy curtain of cobwebs and dust. Our hearts raced with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation as we descended into the darkness, our footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust that coated the stairs. With each step, the air grew colder, the silence more oppressive, until we reached the bottom and found ourselves in a chamber unlike any we had ever seen. The walls were lined with shelves upon shelves of ancient tomes and arcane artifacts, their surfaces coated in a thick layer of dust and neglect. Strange symbols adorned the walls, their meaning lost to time, while eerie shadows danced across the floor, cast by the flickering light of our flashlights. For a moment, we stood there in awe, our minds reeling with the possibilities of what we had discovered. But as the chill of the air seeped into our bones and the weight of the darkness pressed down upon us, we knew that it was time to leave this place behind and return to the safety of the world above. With one last glance over our shoulders, we made our way back up the stairs and out into the fading light of evening, our hearts still racing with the thrill of our adventure. And as we walked home together, we knew that this would be a day that we would never forget, a memory to cherish and hold close for the rest of our lives.
I moved into a quaint little neighborhood about a year ago. Everything seemed perfect at first, charming houses, friendly neighbors, and a serene atmosphere. But there was something off about one of the houses next door, the one right beside mine. The house itself wasn't particularly eerie, but its inhabitant, Mr. Grady, sent shivers down my spine from the moment I laid eyes on him. He was a tall, gaunt man with sunken eyes that seemed to pierce through your soul. His thin, wiry frame moved with an unsettling grace like a predator stalking its prey. I first encountered him when I was taking out the trash one evening. He was standing in his yard, just staring at me with an unnerving intensity. His lips stretched into a thin, tight-lipped smile that didn't reach his eyes. I muttered a nervous hello and hurried back inside, feeling his gaze boring into my back. From then on, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched whenever I was outside. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of him through the curtains of his windows, always watching, always observing. It felt like he was studying me, analyzing my every move. As weeks passed, strange occurrences began happening around the neighborhood. Pets started disappearing without a trace, and eerie noises echoed through the night. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Grady was somehow involved, but I had no proof. Then one night as I was lying awake in bed, I heard footsteps outside my window. Heart pounding, I peeked through the curtains and saw Mr. Grady standing in my yard, his eyes fixed on my house. I froze, paralyzed with fear, as he slowly turned his head and looked straight at me. That's when I knew, without a doubt, that there was something deeply sinister about my neighbor, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was his next target. The next morning I couldn't shake off the sense of dread that had settled over me after the chilling encounter with Mr. Grady. I tried to convince myself that I was just being paranoid, that there was a rational explanation for his behavior. But deep down, I knew better. As the days went by, I became hyper-aware of every little sound outside my house, every rustle of leaves, every creak of the floorboards. It felt like I was living on edge, constantly waiting for something to happen. Then one evening, as I was returning home from work, I noticed a strange smell wafting from Mr. Grady's house. It was a sickly sweet odor, like rotting flesh mixed with something metallic. My stomach churned as I hurried past his driveway, trying to ignore the ominous feeling that settled over me. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Just as I was about to drift off to sleep, I heard a faint scratching sound coming from outside my window. My heart leaped into my throat as I lay there, frozen in terror, listening to the eerie noise. I mustered up the courage to peek through the curtains, and what I saw sent chills down my spine. It was Mr. Grady, his thin silhouette illuminated by the dim moonlight, crouched outside my window like some sinister specter. His eyes gleamed in the darkness, fixed on me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I recoiled in horror, scrambling away from the window as fast as I could. My mind raced with fear as I realized that Mr. Grady wasn't just a creepy neighbor. He was something far more sinister, something out of a nightmare. I knew then that I had to get away from that place, away from Mr. Grady and whatever malevolent force seemed to surround him. But as I packed my bags and prepared to flee, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And I knew that I wouldn't be safe until I was far, far away from that haunted neighborhood.
In the midst of our 8th grade sleepover, the dim glow of flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls, adding an air of mystery to our gathering. Amidst the laughter and whispers that filled the room, a palpable sense of adventure took hold, infusing the air with an electric energy that crackled with excitement. As we rummaged through the cluttered confines of my friend's attic, our eager fingers brushed against forgotten relics of generations past. Dusty trunks and cobweb-covered boxes yielded treasures of antiquity, each item holding the potential to unlock secrets long shrouded in obscurity. And then, as if guided by some unseen hand, we stumbled upon it, an old, weathered spirit board, nestled among a pile of forgotten memorabilia. Layers of dust coated its surface, obscuring the intricate patterns and faded letters etched into its wooden frame. Yet, despite its age and neglect, the board exuded an undeniable aura of mystique, beckoning us to uncover the secrets it held within. Excitement surged through us like a tidal wave, fueled by the thrill of the unknown and the promise of adventure that lay just beyond our grasp. With wide eyes and eager hearts, we made a unanimous decision to delve into the mysteries that the spirit board promised to unveil, casting aside any lingering doubts or reservations in favor of the tantalizing possibility of communing with the supernatural. Gathering around the ancient artifact, we set the stage for our foray into the unknown, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across the attic floor. With bated breath, we placed our trembling fingers on the planchette, our hearts pounding in anticipation of the otherworldly communication that was to come. At first, the session unfolded as a mere game, our youthful curiosity driving us to test the boundaries between the known and the unknown. With a mixture of trepidation and excitement, we watched as the planchette glided across the spirit board, spelling out messages from realms beyond our comprehension. Laughter bubbled up between us as we exchanged nervous glances, each of us secretly wondering if there might be some truth to the mystical forces we were invoking. But as the night wore on and the hour grew late, the atmosphere within the attic shifted, the air thickening with an intangible sense of anticipation. A subtle chill crept into the room, seeping into our bones and setting our nerves on edge. The flickering candlelight cast long, twisting shadows on the walls, their dancing forms taking on a sinister quality that sent shivers down our spines. With each passing moment, the energy in the room seemed to intensify, crackling with an electric charge that set our hair on end. A sense of unease settled over us like a heavy blanket, stifling our laughter and replacing it with a creeping sense of foreboding. It was as if the very fabric of reality had begun to fray, unraveling the fragile threads that bound us to the world of the living. Despite our growing unease, we pressed on, unable to tear ourselves away from the enigmatic forces at play. Each movement of the planchette felt like a step further into the unknown, a journey into the depths of the supernatural that we were ill-prepared to undertake. And then, with a suddenness that left us breathless, the atmosphere in the attic shifted once more, the energy reaching a fever pitch that seemed to consume us whole. A sense of impending doom hung heavy in the air, a silent warning of the horrors that awaited us in the darkness beyond. Strange messages materialized before our eyes, their cryptic and unsettling nature sending a chill down our spines. Each word seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, as if the spirits themselves were reaching out to us from the ethereal realm beyond. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I read the eerie messages, a sense of unease settling like a heavy weight in the pit of my stomach. Yet, despite the fear gnawing at the edges of our resolve, a fierce curiosity held us captive, compelling us to linger and delve deeper into the mysteries that surrounded us. It was as if we had become ensnared in a web of the supernatural, unable to tear ourselves away from the unfolding spectacle unfolding before us, even as a voice deep within whispered of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. And then, with a suddenness that stole the very breath from our lungs, the planchette began to move of its own accord, as if guided by an unseen force. It glided across the surface of the board with a fluidity that defied explanation, its movements swift and purposeful, as if driven by an urgency that sent a chill racing down my spine. Panic surged within me, a primal instinct urging me to flee, to end the session before it was too late. My trembling fingers twitched with the desire to pull away, to sever the connection with the unknown entity that now held us in its thrall. Yet, as I made to move, a chorus of voices rose up around me, urging me to stay, their tones a cacophony of fear and fascination that mirrored the tumultuous storm raging within my own heart. Their hands reached out, grasping at my own with a desperate urgency, their fingers intertwining with mine in a silent plea for solidarity against the encroaching darkness. And so, with a mixture of dread and determination, I forced myself to remain, rooted to my spot as the planchette continued its frenzied dance across the board, each movement propelling us further into the heart of the unknown. In the dim, flickering light of the candle, shadows writhed and twisted upon the walls, casting grotesque forms that seemed to mock our growing terror. Each flicker of the flame cast the shadows into a frenzied dance, their contorted shapes morphing and shifting with an otherworldly fluidity. The once familiar contours of the attic took on a sinister aspect, the lines between reality and nightmare blurring into a nightmarish tableau of fear and uncertainty. The air grew heavy with tension, thick with a palpable sense of foreboding that seemed to press down upon us like a suffocating weight. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside, was magnified 100-fold, each sound echoing through the attic with an eerie clarity that sent shivers racing down our spines. With bated breath, we waited in silence, our senses strained to the breaking point as we braced ourselves for what would come next. Time seemed to stretch into eternity as we stood on the precipice of the unknown, our hearts pounding in our chests as we prepared to confront whatever horrors lay in wait beyond the veil of darkness. And then, as if in response to the silent plea that hung heavy in the air, a bone-chilling breeze swept through the room with an eerie whisper, snuffing out the candle's feeble flame in an instant. The sudden darkness enveloped us like a suffocating cloak, plunging us into a void devoid of light or solace. Panic seized my heart in a vice-like grip, its icy fingers squeezing the breath from my lungs as I groped blindly in the oppressive blackness. My hands flailed desperately through the void, searching for purchase in the impenetrable darkness, but finding only empty air that offered no reprieve from the overwhelming fear that threatened to consume me whole. With each passing second, the darkness seemed to deepen, its suffocating weight pressing down upon me with a relentless force that left me gasping for air. A sense of utter helplessness washed over me as I stood frozen in the darkness, my mind racing with thoughts of the horrors that lurked just beyond my sight. Every sound, every movement, sent a jolt of terror coursing through my veins, as I waited with bated breath for the next inevitable terror to reveal itself in the blackness that surrounded me. In the oppressive darkness, the air became thick with an almost tangible presence, its weight pressing down on me from all sides like a suffocating embrace. Each breath felt labored, as if I were struggling to draw air into my lungs against an unseen force determined to choke the life from me. Panic clawed at the edges of my consciousness, threatening to overwhelm me as I fought against the suffocating grip of the darkness. Desperate for some shred of reassurance, I called out to my friends, my voice echoing hollowly in the void. But my cries fell on deaf ears, swallowed up by the oppressive silence that surrounded us like a shroud. It was as if the darkness itself had become a living entity, devouring sound and light alike in its insatiable hunger for oblivion. Alone and isolated in the suffocating blackness, I felt a primal fear take root within me, gnawing at my sanity with razor-sharp teeth. Every shadow seemed to writhe and twist with malevolent intent, every whisper of movement sending shivers of dread coursing down my spine. In that moment, I felt as though I were teetering on the precipice of madness, the darkness threatening to consume me whole and drag me down into its unfathomable depths. With each passing second, the weight of its presence grew heavier, pressing down on me until I could scarcely breathe beneath its suffocating embrace. And then, just as suddenly as it had descended upon us like a suffocating shroud, the darkness began to dissipate, melting away like morning mist beneath the gentle touch of dawn's first light. With a sense of profound relief, I felt the oppressive weight that had pressed down upon me gradually lift, replaced by the soft glow of the breaking day. As the darkness receded, I found myself standing amidst the soft hues of dawn's embrace, the events of the night fading into a hazy blur of memory that seemed to slip through my fingers like grains of sand. The air was cool and crisp, carrying with it the promise of a new day untainted by the horrors of the night before. Around me, my friends stood in a silent tableau of shock and disbelief, their faces pale and drawn beneath the gentle light of dawn. Their eyes bore witness to the traumas we had endured together, haunted by the memories of the darkness that had threatened to consume us whole. In the quiet stillness of the morning, we gathered together, united by the shared experience of our harrowing ordeal. Though the events of the night had left us shaken and scarred, we took solace in the knowledge that we had emerged from the darkness stronger and closer than ever before. And as the first rays of sunlight bathed us in their warm embrace, we knew that we would carry the memories of that fateful night with us always, a testament to the fragility of the human spirit and the resilience of friendship in the face of unspeakable horrors. As we stumbled out of the house, the cool embrace of the morning air enveloped us like a comforting blanket, a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness that had held us captive just moments before. Blinking against the gentle light of dawn, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me, as if I were emerging from the depths of a nightmare into the safety of waking reality. Yet, even as we stepped out into the light of day, the memories of the night that had unfolded within those walls remained etched in our minds like scars, impossible to erase or forget. The events of the evening had transformed what was meant to be a simple sleepover into a journey into the heart of darkness itself, leaving an indelible mark on each of us that would linger long after the sun had risen and the shadows had dispersed. Though we tried to bury the memories of that fateful night beneath the facade of normalcy, we knew deep down that they would always remain a part of us, a constant reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows, waiting to be unleashed by those who dare to play with forces beyond their control. In the quiet moments of reflection that followed, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden in the world around us, waiting to be unearthed by the curious and the brave.